Welcome back, my fellow Overlanders. And today we are reading, of course, continuing reading Gregor the Overlander. And we are on chapter 10. And we've officially hit part 2 of the series. I do believe, looking back, it was just brought to Gregor's attention that Vicus might actually know of Gregor's father, who may have actually traveled to the Underland. So we are going to go ahead and read chapter 10. Part 2 is called The Quest. So The Quest, part 2. Okay, so, all right, chapter 10. When Gregor's heart started up again, it beat so hard, he thought it might break through his chest. His hand reached out of his own, his fingers grasping for the keychain. Where'd you get that? I told you, other overlanders have fallen. Some years ago, we rescued one very, very like you in face and feature. I cannot recall the exact date, said Vicus, placing the keychain in Gregor's hand. 2 years, 7 months, and 13 days ago, thought Gregor aloud, he said. It belongs to my dad. Waves of happiness washed over him as he ran his fingers over the worn leather braid and the metal snap that allowed you to attach it to your belt loop. Memories flashed through his mind. His dad fanning out the keys to find one to open the front door. His dad dangling the keys in front of Lizzie in her stroller. His dad on a picnic blanket in Central Park using a key to pry open a container of potato salad. Your father? Luxa's eyes widened, and a strange expression crossed her face. Vicus, you do not think that I do not know, Luxa, but the signs are strong, said Vicus. My mind has been on little ease since my mind has been on little else since he's arrived. Luxa turned to Gregor, her violet eyes quizzical. What? What was her problem now? Your father, like you, was desperate to return home. With much difficulty, we persuaded him to stay some weeks, but the strain proved too great, and one night, also like you, he slipped away, said Vicus. The rats reached him before we did. Gregor smashed into reality, and the joy drained out of him. Of course, there were no other living overlanders in Regalia. Vicus had told him that in the stadium, his dad had tried to get home and had met up with the same fate Gregor had. Only the Underlanders hadn't been there to save him. He swallowed the lump in his throat. He's dead then. So we assumed, but then came reports the rats had kept him living, said Vicus. Our spies confirm this regularly. He's alive? Asked Gregor. Feeling hope rushed back through him. But why? Why didn't they kill him? We do not know why with certainty, but I have suspicions. Your father was a man of science, was he not? Asked Vicus. Yeah, he teaches science, said Gregor. He couldn't make sense of what Vicus was saying. He did. Did the rats want his dad to teach chemistry? In our conversations, it was clear he understood the workings of nature, said Vicus. Of course, lightning, of fire, of powders that explode. Gregor was beginning to catch his drift. Look, if you think my dad's making guns or bombs for the rats, you can forget it. He would never do that. It is hard to imagine what any of us would do in the caves of the rats, said Vicus gently. To keep sanity must be a struggle. To keep honor, a Herlusian fate. I am not judging your father, only seeking to explain why he survives so long. The rats fight well in close range, but if we attack from afar, they have no recourse but to run. Of all things, they wish a way to kill us at a distance, said Luxa. She didn't seem to be accusing his father either, and she didn't seem mad at him anymore. Gregor wished she'd stop staring at him. My wife, Sullivan, has a different theory, said Vicus, brightening a little. She believes the rats want your father to make them a thumb. A thumb? Asked Gregor. Boots held up her thumb to show him. Yeah, little girl, I know what a thumb is, he said, smiling down at her. Rats have no thumbs, and therefore cannot do many things that we can. They cannot make tools or weapons. They are masters of destruction, but creation evades them, said Vicus. Be glad, Overlander. If they believe your father can be useful, it is all that will give him time, said Luxa sadly. Did you meet my dad too? He asked. No, she said. I was too young for such meetings. Luxa was still concerned with her dolls then, said Vicus. Gregor tried hard to imagine Luxa with a doll and couldn't. My parents met him and spoke him well, said Luxa. Her parents. She'd still had parents then. Gregor wondered how the rats had killed them, but knew he'd never ask. Luxa speaks true. At present, the rats are our bitter enemies. If you meet a rat outside the walls of Regalia, you have two choices, to fight or to be killed. Only the hope of a great advantage would keep a human alive in their paws. Especially an Overlander, said Vicus. I don't see why they hate us so much, said Gregor. He thought of Shed's burning eyes, his last words. Overlander, we hunt you to the last rat. Maybe they knew how people in the Overland tried to trap, poison, and kill off all the rats above ground, except the ones they used in lab experiments. Vicus and Luxa exchanged a look. We must tell him, Luxa. We must know what he faces, said Vicus. Do you really think it is he? She said. Who? He who, said Gregor. He had a bad feeling about where this conversation was going. Vicus rose from the table. Come, he said, and headed out the door. Gregor got up, willing his stiff arms to carry boots. He and Luxa reached the door at the same time and stopped. After you, he said. She glanced at him sideways and followed Vicus. The halls were lined with Underlanders who watched them pass in silence and then broke into whispers. They did not have to go far before Vicus stopped at a polished wooden door. Gregor realized it was the first wooden thing he'd seen in the Underland. What had Vicus said about something being as rare as trees? For trees, you needed lots of light, and how would they grow here? Vicus pulled out a key and opened the door. He took a torch from the holder in the hall and led the way in. Gregor stepped into a room that seemed to be an empty stone cube. On every surface were carvings. Not just the walls, but the floor and ceiling too. These weren't the frolicking animals that he'd seen elsewhere in Regalia. These were words, tiny words that must have taken forever to chisel out. A, B, C, said Boots, which is what she always said when she saw letters. A, B, C, D, she added for emphasis. These are the prophecies of Bartholomew of Sandwich, said Vicus. Once we sealed the gates, he devoted the rest of his life to recording them. I bet he did, thought Gregor. It sounded just like the kind of thing crazy old Sandwich would do. Drag a bunch of people underground and then lock himself in a room and chip out more crazy stuff on the walls. So what do you mean prophecies? Asked Gregor, although he knew what prophecies were. They were predictions of what would happen in the future. Most religions had them, and his grandma loved a book by a guy named Nostra something. To hear her talk, the future was pretty depressing. Sandwich was a visionary, said Vicus. He foretold many things that have happened to our people. And a bunch that haven't? Asked Gregor, trying to sound innocent. He hadn't ruled out prophecies entirely, but he was skeptical about anything Sandwich came up with. Besides, even if someone told you that something would happen in the future, what could you do about it? Some we have not yet unraveled, admitted Vicus. He foretold my parents' end, said Luxa solemnly, running her fingers over part of the wall. There was no mystery in that. Vicus put his arm around her and stared at the wall. No, he Gregor felt awful about the 10th time that night. On whatever he thought, he would try to talk about the prophecies with respect. But there is one that hangs most heavily over our heads. It is called the prophecy of Grey. For what we know, for we know not whether it be fair or foul, said Vicus. We do know that it was to Sandwich the most sacred and maddening of his visions, for he could never see the outcome, although it came to him many times. Vicus gestured to a small oil lamp that illuminated a panel of the wall. It was the only light in the room besides the torch. Maybe they kept it burning constantly. Will you read? Asked Vicus, and Gregor approached the panel. The prophecy was written like a poem, in 4 parts. Some of the letterings were odd, but he could make it out. A, B, C, said Boots, touching the letters. Gregor began to read. Beware, Underlanders, time hangs by a thread. The hunters are hunted, white water runs red. The Nars will strike to extinguish the rest. The hope of the hopeless resides in a quest. An overland warrior, a son of the sun, may bring us back light, he may bring us back none. But gather your neighbors and follow his call, or rats will most surely devour us all. 2 over, 2 under of royal descent, 2 flyers, 2 crawlers, 2 spinners ascent. 1 Nar beside and 1 lost up ahead, and 8 will be left when we count up the dead. The last who will die must decide where he stands. The fate of the 8 is contained in his hands. So bid him take care, and bid him look where he leaps, as life may be death, and death life again reaps. Gregor finished the poem and didn't know quite what to say. He blurted out, "What's that mean?" Vickis shook his head. "No one knows for certain. It tells of a dark time when the future of our people is undecided. It calls for a journey, not just of humans, but of many creatures, which may lead either to salvation or ruin. The journey will be led by an overlander." "Yeah, well, I got that part. This warrior guy," said Gregor. "You asked why the rats hate overlanders so deeply. It is because they know one will be the warrior of the prophecy," said Vickis. "Oh, I see," said Gregor. "So when's he coming?" Vickis fixed his eyes on Gregor. "I believe he is already here." Okay, so that was a pretty cool chapter. That finishes chapter 10. Sorry. And next chapter will be, of course, chapter 11. I hope to have that up tomorrow. But overall, that was a cool chapter. We got our first glimpse of this prophecy that will partake in this book that we believe. So that's pretty cool. All right. So, well, thank you all very much for listening. If you enjoyed this at all, or even enjoyed some of the past videos, please leave a like and subscribe. I apologize if the quality on this is pretty low. The internet in the area has been kind of plummeting. So, anyways, thank you very much for listening. Again, if you liked it, please leave a like and subscribe. Feel free to comment below, and I will see you next time. All right, guys, take care.